So Slimbly Stocks on YouTube says, "Hi, I am from India. I'm planning my first holiday trip of life with my wife and 5 years old child to New Zealand for 5 days. I don't have a license. Is there an easy way to traveling around New Zealand without a car?" And that relates to another question that we received in a YouTube comment saying, "Hi, Robin and Laura. Thanks for all the nice videos you are making. I am in the very early stages of planning my trip to New Zealand for after the pandemic. Before I start planning details, I would like to get your opinion on the best ways to travel around New Zealand. What are my options and what is best?" So there is actually a ton of ways to travel in New Zealand. And so to answer your question, we are going to be covering all the kind of probably about the 10 most popular ways to travel around New Zealand. And we're going to start by mentioning traveling by car. I do understand that when asking your question, you said you don't have a license, but the other person may have a license. And also it's a good option to consider. So traveling by car in New Zealand is actually a very good way to explore most of the country. And it gives you a ton of flexibility because when you travel by car, you actually are able to go wherever you want, whenever you want, and there's really not much of a there's really not much in your way. You can be completely in charge of your schedule. So that's already a very a great advantage to traveling by car. There are also a lot of places which are a little bit more off the beaten track, and that usually most of the buses wouldn't get you there. So that means that you may miss a few places around New Zealand, but let's be honest, most of the mainstream kind of areas of New Zealand will be accessible by bus. Also, when you're going to be stuck in a city, and you want to explore around and everything, rather than having to try to work your commuting and everything like that, you just hop in your car and you go wherever you want. So the flexibility of traveling by car is it's a little bit of an obvious one, but I feel like it's something that cannot be overstated, and that's why it is one of the main ways to travel around New Zealand. Now, when you want to travel around New Zealand by car, you've got a couple of options. You can either buy your own car. That is very valid for people which are coming to New Zealand on a working holiday visa. So if they're coming for quite a while and they want to buy a car, a lot of people just buy an old used car, and that can cost between $3,000 to like $8,000, something in between there. And you'll be able to just travel around New Zealand for the few months that you're here. The working holiday visa usually allows you to stay up to 12 months. And then around the end of your time in New Zealand, you are going to be able to resell your car. Now, the couple of things to keep in mind when you do that is that first up, watch our video about what to know when buying cars in New Zealand. That's very important to do that. And know that you're going to have to spend a decent amount of time like sticking to one area, let's say in Auckland, and trying to buy your car. It's going to take you a couple of weeks, and then trying to sell your car, trying to get some of your money back and everything. That's going to take you a couple of weeks. Also know that you may lose a little bit of money in there, so don't think you're going to get all your money back, but honestly, they're still way cheaper than renting a car. Which leads me to renting a car. Renting a car is your second option to travel New Zealand by car. There is a ton of rental car companies around New Zealand, and we can talk about renting cars for hours here on this channel, and actually we have so many videos about car rental on the channel, so check them out. But you can also head to nzpocketguide.com. So if you click on nzpocketguide.com, there's a link in the description below. Then you click on prepare your trip, then transportation, and then car rental. And then in there, you will find so much information, comparison of most of the trustworthy companies around New Zealand, with our opinion on them and what they're offering and everything. So that will help you make the most of your trip in New Zealand. So here you go. That is traveling by car. Now, the next way to travel in New Zealand is to buy or rent your own campervan.
Yeah, so obviously it offers the similar advantages to having a car, except for this time it has accommodation inside the vehicle. So if you wanting to have the convenience of never having to unpack and repack, going to different accommodations, campervans are really handy for that, and can in some circumstances save you some money, but not as much money as you might think. So it's really important to keep that in mind. We do have videos on this channel on comparing, for instance, renting a car and staying in accommodations like Airbnbs and hostels compared to staying in a camper van and going to holiday parks and some free campsites and stuff. Usually the price does sort of work out about the same, so there's always that to bear in mind. But yeah, camper vans are they're kind of a little bit more convenient, and it's kind of like a little adventure that you get to. Like the camper van road trip is something that appeals to a lot of people. Just hitting the road, sleeping up somewhere for the night. Like it's more a sort of I guess a glamorized experience doing a camper van road trip around New Zealand.
Freedom.
Yeah, having the freedom to go wherever you want and sort of stay wherever you want, except for you can't stay wherever you want in New Zealand, as there are laws about where you can camp in a camper van and where you can't. And again, we do have loads of videos on this channel about freedom camping in New Zealand and camper van rental in New Zealand. So yeah, it's good to make sure that you are aware of all those sort of things before you decide whether traveling New Zealand by camper van is right for you. And similar to the car, where you can buy used cars and sell them back at the end of your trip, or you can rent a camper van and basically rent a camper van. So yeah, basically there's the same options as cars. If you're staying in New Zealand for, I'd say, a minimum of about 3 months or so, it is a good idea to try and buy a camper van, because that will save you more money than renting. But alternatively, there are a ton of camper van rental companies in New Zealand, which we have loads of articles on nzpocketguide.com to help you compare different camper van rental companies.
So the next option to travel around New Zealand is to take the bus. So there's multiple type of bus, and the first one I want to talk about are the national coach buses. So national coach buses are basically some buses that goes from A to B and will take you throughout the entirety of New Zealand. I think there is at least 200 destinations around the country that you can go to, and the main company that does this is called Intercity. It's pretty simple. It's usually really cheap. You get a bus ticket and you go from, let's say, Rotorua to Auckland, and you all sorted, and you're just going to go drive straight through. It does a few stops along the way, and it makes it super easy to travel in New Zealand, and it's extremely competitive price-wise. If you're really much on a budget and you want to save even more money when traveling by bus in New Zealand, you can get a bus pass. And we do have an article on nzpocketguide.com to help you choose which one is the best bus pass for you, and you'll be able to save a little bit of money on there. So it's a pretty straightforward way to travel around New Zealand. I mean, it's definitely safe for families as well. If you're traveling with a bike in New Zealand, it's not always that you'll be able to get your bike on the bus. So be aware of these kind of things like bike, surfboard, like those extra big items. So be aware of that and inquire every time. Aside from that, I feel like, it's taking the bus from a point A to point B. I don't know if there is much to say about it. There is obviously going to be some parts of the country that you'll be missing because you're traveling by bus, but you will be saving so much money that you can spend this extra money onto tours in order to go to selected places. So I don't really see that too much of a negative. It is one of our favorite way to travel around New Zealand, just because of the whole convenience. What I like when being in a bus, and we will talk about different type of buses, that's the next 3 points are type of buses. But what I really enjoy is the fact that you get to see the scenery and you get to enjoy it rather than driving on really small winding roads. So traveling by bus in New Zealand is pretty awesome. So that was national coach buses. Is there more bus tours in New Zealand?
Well, there are bus tours or coach tours in New Zealand, which are basically fully guided tours, and this is usually a really good option if you have limited time in New Zealand, which is the case for Simply Stocks, who has given us this question. Just 5 days. So there are, for instance, 5-day bus tours. I think only 5 days would do just one of the islands of New Zealand, but that's still like a really good option if you have limited time. And basically, bus tours are where most things are organized for you. The itinerary, where you're going, it's on a set itinerary for a set amount of days, and there's usually inclusions. For instance, a lot of bus tours in New Zealand have breakfast included. They have the accommodation included. They have some other meals included. Some of them will have, say, every lunch and dinner included, while other ones might have just a few dinners included or a few lunches included, and they'll stop at various different lunch places on the journey the way, so all the passengers have the freedom to go check out whatever food places they want, for instance. And some bus tours do have some activities included. There are quite a few bus tours in New Zealand that have, for instance, the Milford Sound cruise included or the Waitomo Caves included. So it's good when you're comparing different bus tours to just have a look at what activities are included and see obviously where they go to on the itinerary to see if they're going to the places that appeal to you. But on top of that, bus tours do have the flexibility of having optional activities added on to the tour. So you basically just need to either let your driver know, or when you're booking your tour, you can usually book some extra activities, for instance. So it does have the flexibility to add some extra activities that you might want to do in New Zealand, obviously for an extra cost, but it has the convenience of being organised for you by the bus tour company. So yeah, that's a really good option if you have limited time and also just want to relax and not stress too much about planning your trip.
All right, so something a little bit in between is the hop on hop off buses. So that's I think that's number 7. We just did like a lot of different ones. We are number 7, hop on hop off buses. So they're kind of a mix between the national coach buses and the bus tours. In such that you're buying a pass basically for a certain route, and then you're going to be going basically from, let's say, Auckland to Coromandel, for instance, and this will take you the whole day. So you're going to stop along the way, see a couple of places. You can pay extra to do some activities, and then they drop you off in a place where you will have to buy your own accommodation there, and then they have a schedule. So every 3 days or 4 days or 5 days, they have another bus that comes, and then you can hop on into the next bus and then keep on going. And that gives you extra time to explore the area as you go. So that's great if you have about a month to 2 months to travel around New Zealand, as it allows you to kind of make your way around the country and explore quite a lot. A couple of words of warning on those kind of buses. So there is Flying Kiwi, there is Kiwi Experience, and there is Stray. Those bus passes are always on special, so never buy them full price. That's the first thing. And second, make sure that it's the right thing for you, and make sure you put all the inclusions in there and you calculate everything, because some of the bus tours which already have the activities included and already have the bike rentals included and all those kind of things, they sometimes end up being cheaper than getting the hop on hop off and having to buy all those activities on top. Because remember, when you do a hop on hop off tour, your bus driver is also your tour guide, but he's also a salesperson that's going to try to sell you more and more activities along the way. So you need to have a decent budget in order to decide to go for something like that. We do have a lot of information about hop on hop off buses on nzpocketguide.com. We have a ton of videos on this channel. We even have like a video where we battle, like, which one is the best between Stray and Kiwi Experience, which is a bit dated now, so we need to redo this video actually at some point. But there is a lot of information out there, and if you do have extra questions about that, because it is not a cheap purchase and there is a lot of terms and conditions attached to it, and not necessarily very obvious from the get-go, feel free to contact us on, you can send a comment on YouTube, any of the video, even on this one here, and ask you questions about it, and we'll make some videos to explain about that, or we'll point you out in the right direction, in the right article on nzpocketguide.com.
Yeah. Okay, next on the list for different ways to get around New Zealand, and this is something that we get asked about quite a lot, is the train network. Now, although New Zealand does have some trains, it's not a transport method that you should solely rely on to travel around New Zealand. The main cities like Auckland and Wellington, they do have sort of suburban train networks, but there's only actually 3 national train lines in New Zealand. So you can take a train from Auckland to Wellington on the North Island. You can take a train across the South Island from Christchurch to Greymouth, and you can also take a train from the top of the South Island down to, I think, only down to Christchurch, so that's from Picton to Christchurch. So that's only going to, if you are just going to be traveling New Zealand just by train, that's only going to allow you to see a tiny portion of the country. On top of that, the train departures are quite limited in New Zealand for these national train lines. In the low season, around the winter time, so that's usually between, what's winter? Oh, sorry, so it's between June and August. Between June and August, so that would be, just having a bit of a, currently right now it's very cold, so yeah, around this time. So yeah, usually the departures during the low season around the winter time are usually about once every 3 days, and in summer they might have some daily departures just between Christchurch and Greymouth, but it's usually once every couple of days. So you can't really use the train to hop off somewhere. You have to kind of wait 3 days for the next train to get back on. So it's not a very good option if you have limited time, and it's not really a good option to be able to get off the train and see different places and, you know, get back on the train in a good, like, convenient time. So yeah, trains do exist in New Zealand, but they're more of a thing to sort of complement your trip if you want to experience maybe some of the scenery by train and do it as an activity. Then that's more what the train journeys are about in New Zealand, not really about the transport.
All right, so the next type of travel, next transportation method to travel around New Zealand, and Michael Mariano right now on the live chat got it. It's plane flight. And so he's asking, when traveling by air, how many options do we have? So that's a very good question. And so there are a lot of like smaller airlines, like Sounds Air, for example. But there is just two mains that you're probably going to be using, and they are Jetstar and Air New Zealand. That's going to be the two options that you're going to have. But honestly, traveling by air in New Zealand is really not kind of recommended, and it's really not a method that we actually will be kind of telling you guys, oh yeah, you definitely should try that, because you're going to miss out on a ton of the beautiful sceneries. So just to give you an idea, right, if you were to drive from Auckland all the way down to Wellington, that will take you about 8 hours, 9 hours. You stop along the way, you know, you experience a few things around, let's say 10 to 12 hours. So that's a long day driving. So as you can tell, New Zealand is really not that big, and it's similar timing on the South Island as well. I was just giving you one idea, right? So New Zealand is really not that big. So it's not, if you don't have like a crazy time constraint, it's really not worth it to kind of take the plane and do the whole nonsense of having to go to the airport, boarding, checking the luggage. It takes so much time, and to miss out so much, you know. New Zealand is more of a country that you explore by road. So traveling by air is going to be more in the case of you rent a car or a campervan from Auckland, you're driving all the way down to Queenstown, and then you fly back from Queenstown all the way to Auckland to leave then afterwards. So that'd be more the way we will use traveling by plane in New Zealand, but I wouldn't use that as my main method of transportation. I wouldn't fly from Auckland to Rotorua and then flying from Rotorua to Wellington and then flying from Wellington to Christchurch and then flying from Christchurch to Queenstown. You will basically miss the whole New Zealand experience altogether. In our opinion, obviously it's just an opinion, right? But New Zealand is known for its fantastic scenery, and when you take commercial plane, you fly really, really high. Now, if you do want to experience New Zealand by air and you want to see those beautiful sceneries, while flying, there is a ton of flights, like tour flights, scenic flights, which are available around New Zealand, especially on the South Island, and they are phenomenal. And there is a ton of videos of us taking some of those planes on the channel. So that's our take on planes. And we're moving on to the last one, which is a little bit of a stretch, but the last one on our list, number 10.
Yeah, so number 10 on our list of ways to get around New Zealand is hitchhiking. Hitchhiking is quite popular in New Zealand, definitely for people on a budget, and you will find that, hitchhiking does occur quite a lot. But there's obviously some downsides to hitchhiking in that you can't really hitchhike around New Zealand if you're on a tight schedule. There is a lot of
plan much, can you?
You can't really plan much. There's a lot of waiting around. People that pick you up might not necessarily be able to take you all the way to where you want to go, so you have to take multiple journeys in order to get to the destination you're trying to head to. And there's also the obvious risk of hitchhiking in that you don't know who you're getting into the vehicle with. There's a lot of things to weigh up. It's not like, I think, in countries like the US where it's like hitchhiking is like an absolute no-no. There's obviously been a lot of bad cases and stuff in other countries, whereas in New Zealand, the amount of cases of bad things happening to hitchhikers is very, very minimal. But you always are taking that risk, so you need to obviously keep that in mind and be quite savvy if you're hitchhiking, and be aware of if basically to say no if you don't want to get in the car with someone that looks dodgy, or be able to actually get out the car if if something goes wrong. So there's obvious risks to hitchhiking, but on the other hand, it is a free way to travel around New Zealand and maybe meet some incredible people, because not everyone that picks you up is a bad person. So
we do pick hitchhikers all the time, so maybe you will stumble upon us.
Yes,
it happened. That actually did happen multiple times.
Yeah, we do pick up hitchhikers when we see them, and we do meet some very interesting people, we have to say. But so you do have to. I guess, like, it depends what sort of person you are and what sort of trip you're on. If you've got lots of time in New Zealand and just want to like slowly make your way around, then perhaps hitchhiking is a good idea. But definitely up to you with that one.
All right, so that was basically 10 ways to travel around New Zealand. I hope that you did find that useful. If you did, clicking the like button is a great way to reward us for all our hard work. It's also free for you, and it tells YouTube that all the content we're doing is quite useful. So that'd be phenomenal. If you do have a question of your own, you can join us during one of live session. Oof, as you can tell, this was recorded live. Michael Marino, for example, just started pitching in as we were recording this. So you can join us. It's at 8 a.m. on Sunday, New Zealand time, every single week. There is a link in the description below to check out what time it will be in your side of the world. There is also some link to relevant articles on the description below, so you can click and go to nzpocketguide.com and check out all the information. It's all free. And if you do want more of us, you can hit the subscribe button. And in the meantime, we'll get back to the live chat.